Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is just around the corner, and you might be wondering, is your graphics card holding back your Microsoft Flight Simulator experience? Well, in this video, I'm going to show you 3 comparison recordings that I made using an RTX 3080, an RTX 4070ti, and an RTX 4090. And I hope that this video allows you to detach slightly from all the marketing that you get bombarded with and actually look at and think about in a tangible way what the cost benefits are to upgrading your card. Now obviously in this test the RTX 4090 is going to deliver the most frames per second, but which one do you think is going to deliver the least amount of frames per second? For clarity, my PC specs are Windows 11 Pro and Intel i7 13700K, MSI Z90P motherboard, 32 gigs of DDR5 Kingston RAM sticks running at 3200 MHz, and I have 3 crucial drives, 2 P5M.2s and an MX500 2TB which I use for recording. In an attempt to keep results consistent, I have opted to utilise the surrounding landscape used in the Red Bull Bullseye Landing Challenge because it offers a lot of ground buildings, partly concealed by a consistent fog effect which I felt would stress the GPUs to their maximum. Whilst I can provide a general comparison based on the available data, individual experiences may well vary due to factors like CPU, RAM and resolution, and this is certainly something that you want to decide upon before upgrading your graphics card. Are you going to be playing in 4K, 2K or 1080p, and what is your minimum accepted frames per second? Is 30 frames a second enough for you, or must it be 60 solid, perhaps even more than that? So for this test, Microsoft Flight Simulator was set to play in ultra settings using DX12 with a resolution of 5120 by 1440p, and it was capped at 120 Hz to match my Aegon 49-inch ultra widescreen monitor. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to look at this monitor. It's a great monitor. So whilst the 4090 series cards have DLSS 3 boost available, I have decided to actually show you the tangible FPS scores for the 3 test results. If you do want to see just how much DLSS 3 boosts your frames using the AI inserted frame system, I have recorded and included an example of that at the end. Finally, one of the key expectations with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is that it will no longer be restricted by a single main thread, and due to AI enhancements and other performance improvements, performance across the board for all users who meet the minimum PC specs should see a noticeable set of improvements. So whilst these results are valid, of course, for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, when Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 finally arrives, the results that you see here should hopefully be exceeded in the new game. So what I'd like you to do whilst you're watching these recordings is to think about what is an acceptable amount of frames per second. What do you deem good enough for you to be able to play on? And please bear in mind that I am recording whilst playing on this, and that also knocks off a few frames per second, as does bringing up the FPS system itself. I'll be interested in your thoughts on which of these 3 cards you personally feel is the best value for money, and I'll do a summation at the end. So for our first test recording at a resolution of 5120 by 1440p on ultra settings locked to a maximum FPS rate of 120 Hz, we have the RTX 3080. Now this is a solid performer, and at £847.99 or less, it's a really good card, and it's a really strong contender for Microsoft Flight Simulator, delivering impressive performance at 1440p and even capable of handling 4K with suitable settings lowered. Now this card is a little bit older than the other 2, so therefore there may be more of them available on the market. Please do be careful who you buy from, and do your best to ensure that you don't get scammed by buying an old mining card or something like that. But if you can buy yourself a brand new one or find yourself a good second-hand one, then it offers a great balance of performance and cost effectiveness. Its strengths are that it does have good overall performance, solid ray tracing capabilities, it's at a reasonable price point, but not the cheapest in this list, I might add. It may struggle with extreme settings at 4K, and it's potentially limited by VRAM for dense scenery. In this particular configuration, you can see that it held an extremely solid 59-60 frames per second throughout, dipping very briefly for one moment to 56 frames per second. It was so stable, in fact, that I actually had to check I hadn't accidentally limited it to 60 frames per second. The maximum temperature this card reached was 17 degrees, and that seems to be about the average for all three of these cards. Our second recording, again at 5120 by 1440p on ultra settings locked to 120 Hz, is the RTX 4070 Ti, and I can find this at £788, which makes this currently the cheapest option out of the three, and it could definitely be considered the sweet spot for most gamers. It offers a significant performance boost over the 3080 with newer titles because it has DLSS 3. Now, I'm not showing you the DLSS 3 performance results here. What I was more interested in were the tangible actual frames per second, but DLSS 3 can almost effectively double the frames per second. So whilst it's getting a lower FPS, just hovering above the 50 frames per second mark consistently here, dipping at one point to 48 frames per second, it will actually deliver, using DLSS 3, around about 90 to 100 frames per second, and it will do that quite consistently. So whether or not you feel that the actual tangible number of frames per second is more relevant than the DLSS 3 system, I'm not sure. So just factor that into your thinking whilst you're playing. I will show you a DLSS 3 performance improvement in the last video, but I just really wanted to show what the cards were capable of delivering in actual tangible terms. So you'll see here that tangibly, without DLSS 3 turned on, this is the slowest of the three cards. So any which way you look at it, it still has excellent performance at 1440p, a good balance of price and performance, and DLSS 3 support for enhanced frame rates also means that at 4K this will likely outperform the RTX 3080. It does have weaknesses though, same as the RTX 3080. It might not fully maximize the potential of high-end monitors at 4K, especially if you're running ultra settings. But I think you can see here that the performance between the two, it's pretty much minimal. So, at nearly twice the price of the other two, £1,700 is the cheapest I was able to find this RTX 4090. It is the most expensive, but it's also a beast, and it has unbelievable longevity in comparison to the other two. The RTX 4090, in short, is a powerhouse, capable of handling Microsoft Flight Simulator with ease at any resolution and any settings. It's the ultimate choice for those who are seeking the absolute best visual experience and maximum number of frame rates. In the test recording here, I was hovering comfortably just below 80 frames per second with the lowest dip of just 69 frames per second. So its strengths are exceptional performance, and it's future-proofed of course, and it has unmatched ray tracing capabilities. Now the weaknesses are obvious. It's an extremely expensive card, and honestly it's overkill for most users. And you can see all three cards here sort of averaging around 68 to 70 degrees whilst running this game in ultra settings on the configuration that I've mentioned here. So some key considerations, resolution, I mentioned this at the beginning. If you're primarily playing at 1080p or 2K, then the RTX 4070 Ti, I think, is an excellent choice. For 4K, the RTX 4090 will obviously deliver the best results, but I think with the DLSS 3, which I'll show you now in this video, this is whilst using the RTX 4090, you can see it's like up into 150 frames per second. But at 4K, I think you can just about get away with the RTX 4070 Ti because the DLSS 3 settings may be with slightly toned down to high graphical settings, will give you a solid experience at, let's face it, half the price of an RTX 4090. Obviously, having high or ultra settings will demand more GPU power, especially with dense scenery and complex weather conditions, like in the example I'm showing you here. DLSS 3 technology can significantly boost performance without sacrificing image quality, making the RTX 4070 and Ti even more of an attractive option, especially if you're going to use this for playing other games. As new games come out, they'll be utilising DLSS 3 technology as well. There is a potential for a CPU bottleneck. Don't ever forget that. Ensure that your CPU is actually capable of handling the workload to avoid limiting the GPU performance through the CPU limitations. I would argue right now that the 4070 Ti seems to offer the best overall value for money if you're buying brand new. If you're buying second hand, then I suspect that the RTX 3080 is going to be easier to get hold of, but then it doesn't have the DLSS 3 capability available. For most flight simulator players, it's capable of providing excellent performance. The RTX 3080 though, as you can see from the test results here, is also a solid choice, especially for those on a budget. You can maybe pick these up cheaper second hand. In this particular test, without the DLSS 3 turned on, it actually outperformed the newer RTX 4070 Ti. Now, you know, the deliberations are there. Are the AI introduced frames valid? Are they relevant? Do they really deliver a better experience? Or is the actual frames per second generated the better marker? I'll leave that for you to debate in the comments. The RTX 4090, as expected, is clearly the ultimate luxury option. The price, of course, does reflect this, and it's primarily suited to serious content creators or enthusiasts who are seeking the highest possible visual fidelity and frame rates. So if, like me, you are recording your gameplay and want solid, high-quality recordings at all times, then this is probably where you want to put your money. But honestly, it really is not necessary unless you are gaming above 2K or recording whilst you are playing. One of the key things for Microsoft Flight Simulator, if that's your primary focus, which is what this video itself focuses on, at the moment Microsoft Flight Simulator, I think, would benefit from a higher CPU than it would a graphics card. It's undeniable, of course, that DLSS 3 can boost frames per second to a super high level, but just looking at the recordings that you've seen, is there really that much difference between the RTX 3080 and the two 40 series cards that are using DLSS 3 in these recordings? Does it really benefit you that much? I think that's the question here. Obviously, NVIDIA's marketing would have you believe that it's absolutely essential to be playing this game at 60 frames per second or higher, but genuinely, I think 30 frames per second at 2K or 4K perhaps, absolutely fine. But you know, that's just me. Everybody's different. It all comes down to your budget and your personal preferences, I suppose, at the end of the day. Anyway, I wanted this to be a honest, unbiased, and totally non-influencing video. I just wanted to show you what the results were based on the system that I have, and I'm very, very interested to hear your thoughts on the actual performance that you can see and the benefits and pros and cons of buying a new card, especially at the prices cards are at the moment. Do seriously consider upgrading your CPU before your graphics card. I think, honestly, the graphics card should be the last thing that you add to your system. I would personally be absolutely happy with either or any of these three. They all delivered very well, but certainly the DLSS 3 capability maybe is the key element between the three cards. Having that does offer you longevity and sort of future-proof your gaming experience, I suppose. But what are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful, and please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.